Hello again. Now, our focus today is on the cost of living. On average, middle-income South Africans spend almost 80% of their salaries within a week. Often, this leaves them with little choice but to turn to loans and credit. Let's find out how bad the situation is from Annalien van der Poel from Debt Rescue. Annalien, good afternoon. Welcome to eNCA. Thank you very much for your time. Let me just begin there. How bad is the situation in terms of South Africans, especially middle-income South Africans, spending almost 80% of their salaries within a week and then forced to get more debt?
Good evening, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. Indeed, it's actually very, very dire. It's something we've been researching for quite a significant period of time. And roughly a year ago, we did our first survey on this and confirmed exactly what you've just said. More than 60% of the participants in our survey back then told us that a week after payday, they don't have any money left in the bank, and they're living on credit for the rest of the month. So realistically, if we look at a more recent survey that we did in June of this year, so many South Africans are actually going without basics like food and electricity at this point, and just purely because they cannot afford it and they've run out of access to credit even. So it's very dire and very, very concerning.
Yeah, I mean, when you do this research, you're looking, is it getting worse year on year, as you've said? I mean, is the trend worsening?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we might not have seen the further interest rate hikes, but they haven't come down. But unfortunately, inflation is still sitting there, and which means that our cost of living goes up. So our debt repayments have remained incredibly high. And now we're looking at the fact that our cost of living continues increasing. So it just means that every month consumers are, in essence, just moving backwards financially because to live is costing more. Electricity went up enormously 2 months ago. So that's gone up. Petrol came down, but not by much. So when we add all of this together, it's definitely, we're continuing to see an increase in it getting worse.
I mean, as things get tighter, what are the options for especially middle-income South Africans? I mean, the middle class is in a crisis, basically.
Yes, very much. And I think we've got to remember that most of us tend to live to the maximum of our means. So when these interest rate hikes happened, it caught a lot of people, most people off guard. Nobody foresaw that it was going to go up by that much that quickly. And then, of course, like I say, since then, we've still had to deal with the cost of living crisis, and it's not just us. So, obviously the first step is the one thing most of us hate doing most, which is budget. We really have to plan where every single cent goes. We need to look at our bank statements, make the changes where we still can, review, revise, cut out where we can on anything that is no longer necessary. And then obviously from a consumer perspective, is if you are having to make ends meet to live on credit and ending up in a debt spiral where you're using credit to buy food, and you've made these changes, is definitely to look at debt counseling as an option, because obviously it's part of the law. It's there to assist over-indebted consumers specifically and find a way out of this debt spiral, pay off the debt that you have, and find a means whereby you don't just worsen the situation by just taking out more debt to every single month to try and keep your head above water.
Are people seeking counseling?
Absolutely, yes. We've seen dramatic increases in inquiries, consumers seeking help, very obviously, struggling to make ends meet. Like I say, it's circumstances beyond their control, but a definite increase in consumers seeking help.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the survey that you're doing, which are the areas that you've mentioned people using credit to buy food, for example? We know that transport is expensive. You've mentioned that electricity went up already in tariffs. We've seen municipalities, metros like Johannesburg, for example, also raising their tariffs in July.
Yeah, and indeed. And I think those are your biggest factors. The biggest contributors are those. Like I said, petrol, obviously, we've now seen, some small cuts over the past few months, but, it's still sitting at enormously high amounts. And as we know, the knock-on effect, for example, on fuel prices that increase is the fact that it doesn't just affect our pockets directly with transport. Because everything in South Africa is transported by road, it means that we've got the secondary impact of it coming through in the cost of goods that we are buying. And unfortunately, when it does go down, and because it goes down by so little, we're not seeing those reductions coming through to us again on the cost of goods. So it's quite a number of factors that are adding up, but those are the biggest ones.
Yeah, I mean, how do we compare? I mean, you do research over this, and perhaps you've got a view of what's happening elsewhere in the world. I'm asking this against the context of when Russia invaded Ukraine just the other year. We saw the price of wheat shoot up worldwide, and the price of sunflower oil and, I mean, cooking oil and all other stuff that comes from the likes of Ukraine shooting up. I mean, how are we the worst in terms of the size of the country as a middle-income country we are compared to other similar jurisdictions?
I think we're probably now in more of a similar situation. I mean, if we look at, for example, the bigger economies like the US. I mean, we know that they last week stated that they were concerned about recession. Now, the saying goes, if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So obviously that is being watched very, very closely, because if those kind of talks do become reality, it'll have a knock-on effect on the rest of the world immediately. But I think the one thing that we've had up until now, and the two factors actually, one which is currently at least we haven't seen for quite some time, has been obviously load shedding. Load shedding obviously did have a massive impact. That is stable at the moment, and we obviously hope that remains so, because obviously that affects manufacturing and small businesses, or all businesses for that matter. And then the other is our unemployment figures. We have some of the highest.
Well, they just went up in the second quarter of the
exactly.
year. It's one of our main stories today. They just went up by 0.6 percentage point in quarter two.
Exactly, and it's sitting at record highs. So realistically speaking, it means that the less people who are employed, the less spending power there is, which means that we are not, driving an economy. We can't grow an economy if people don't have money to spend. And then if unemployment is now an additional factor, it means that it places that additional burden. So in comparing us, we do have unique factors, and then we have factors that are obviously universal and do affect a lot of countries.
Yeah, are we in a debt trap as South Africans now?
Definitely. Unfortunately, and largely this is because of those two biggest factors. If you look at your budget and you simplify it into two columns, living expenses on one and debt on the other, both sides have increased enormously because of inflation impact on cost of living and interest rates on the others. We're most definitely, unfortunately, sitting in a place where if consumers can't make ends meet, they're having to turn to debt to feed themselves.
Yeah, when it comes to debt counseling, you said it's allowed by law. Are the banks and the people who've lent the money, open to all kinds of arrangements? Are you able, if you need debt counseling, to negotiate certain terms which could be helping you to breathe better every month?
Absolutely. So that's the beauty of exactly what debt counseling is the credit providers have to take part in renegotiating debt, and because the process has been around for more than 16 years, what this means is that the credit providers fully understand the impact on consumers, and that they are willing to and do partake in this process of renegotiating debt. Reducing the monthly repayment amount that you have to make and extending the term slightly, but then at least making sure that instead of you paying this higher installment that you can't afford, for example, to put food on the table, thereby having to get into more debt, you now have a budget within which you live, which you don't need credit for, and you're paying this reduced installment. And then, of course, one of the most important factors of debt counseling is the fact that it gives you legal protection. Because it's law, it means that legal action cannot be taken against you whilst you are under debt review and making your monthly payments, etc. So it's an amazing process, and it's got wonderful success stories of consumers rehabilitating and re-entering the credit market without debt. And for those who want to re-enter into the credit market and incur debt, they are able to do so again.
Yeah, and with the economy not growing higher than it has been, with the inflation not coming down as fast or as low as it should, interest rates sticking stubbornly high, it's going to be some time before we can get ourselves out of this debt trap. It takes a little bit of discipline as well.
It does, and like I said, I think most South Africans are getting more and more aware of it and are taking more proactive steps where they can to try and make these changes to their budgets, to review and revise and cut down. And people are creating amazing WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups and stuff where they are sharing deals with each other and so forth. And it shows exactly how desperate the situation is, that if people are standing together to let each other know, listen, this item is on special at that store and this item is on special at that store. South Africans are trying. They really are trying, but a lot of this is beyond their control, and they just can't with the salaries that they do get in for those that are employed. Obviously, that it's just not enough at this point with the cost of living being so high.
Thank you very much for your time and insights this afternoon on eNCA. Annalien van der Poel from Debt Rescue. Now, women have historically